Okay, let's get cracking with the rest of this stuff. In this video, we're going to focus in on the Civil War in particular. We're going to go over a few of the major events in the beginning that sort of lead up to it. We're going to go straight into the middle of it and just kind of go through the big battles and some of the differences between the North and the South at the time. And we're going to briefly hit on Reconstruction. Just a note, if you haven't seen the other video that's on slavery and Western expansion, there's a lot of stuff that plays directly into what's going on during this video in that one. So if you haven't, check it out. There's a lot of stuff up on the board. I know that can be intimidating, but trust me, I'm going to try and make sense out of it all. Remember, this is a skeletal outline. Go to your notes. Check them out. Go to Dr. Stoll's website. And if you have any questions, be sure to email me or any of the other TAs or Dr. Stoll. We'll be happy to help you out. So let's get started. First of all, we're going to move this desk all the way over here to the pre-war. Okay, so this is pretty important stuff right here. There's a lot to go over, but the first thing we're going to start off with are the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Now, you may remember in the last video we talked about Dred Scott and sort of what he means to the movement. Basically, the court says that if you are a black person, you're not automatically a citizen. This infuriates a lot of people in the North, but it also divides the nation in a lot of ways, and people want to know what the candidates, what the big names in politics, that's what I should say, have to say about this. So the big guy at the moment is Stephen Douglas. He's a Democrat, and folks really want to know what he says because he may very well be the next president of the United States. So he goes to Illinois, where he's going to debate this guy named Abe Lincoln. Now, Lincoln is a nobody at this point. People don't know who he is, but he's going to make a name for himself. He is a Republican. He's part of the Republican Party. And he is going to be openly opposed to slavery, which is pretty bold, especially because we've been looking at figure after figure in the U.S. presidencies who have been Southerners, or at least willing to be kind of back and forth on slavery. Lincoln's flat out against it. So they're going to engage in these really intense debates, and Lincoln is actually going to come out as a sort of a national figure from this. People came to see Douglas, but they left with an appreciation for Lincoln. Let's make sure we got everything there. Yeah, great. So, while things get going, the election's getting ready to go for 1860. We have a little incident happen at a place called Harpers Ferry. Okay? It is right there. Harpers Ferry, 1859. This is a really interesting episode. So we get this guy named John Brown. John Brown is basically the most radical of all the abolitionists. This guy is passionate about freeing the slaves, and he's going to do some radical stuff. So he gets this idea in his head. He says, you know what if I go down to Virginia and we take this arsenal at Harpers Ferry and we put a call out to slaves across the state to come out and fight for their freedom. We're going to, in a sense, cause a revolt. Remember, that's one of the things we said. That's one of the reasons that slaves didn't revolt. They didn't have weapons. You give them weapons, they're naturally going to revolt. So John Brown does it. He gets a group of abolitionists, goes to Harpers Ferry, takes Harpers Ferry, and he puts the call out. But nothing happens. I mean, I don't know what he expected. It's not like slaves can just get up and leave the plantations at any time. It's a big disaster. And General Robert E. Lee is going to get called up, and he's going to retake Harpers Ferry. John Brown is captured. He is put in jail, and he is sentenced to death by hanging, and he will be executed. Now, this is a really important event because effectively it's going to really, really draw the divide between the North and the South. The South is going to be completely freaked out by this. Hey, Yankees are coming down here, and they're basically trying to start slave revolts. And that's just terrifying. You got to remember, Haiti is still fresh on the minds of a lot of people in the South. And that was not a clean-cut affair. That was bloody as can be. And the same thing happening down there, well, it's terrifying. There's no bigger fear to a Southerner than a slave revolt. To the north, John Brown is going to come out as a martyr. He's going to be one of these guys who actually didn't just talk. He didn't just, get up on top of a podium and, have this sort of moral attitude. He actually went and did something. He cared so much about slavery that he actually acted on his beliefs. So a lot of people think he was unjustly killed. And it's going to really ignite the fires of several abolitionists. So really important moment, going to make that divide between the North and the South even deeper. All right? So we have an election that comes about in 1860, right there. Okay? 1860, another one of those real big, messy elections. There's 4 candidates. We've got John C. Bell. He's going to be for the Union Party. We also have the Democrats. They've got this guy, Stephen Douglas, who's the one from the debates. The Southern Democrats, now, so Southerners feel like, we can't really trust the Democrats up north. We need to have our own version. They get this guy, John C. Breckinridge. And then, of course, the Republicans have Lincoln. Now, it's an interesting election because Lincoln is going to come out on top, but not because he wins the popular vote. As a matter of fact, he's just going to win the Electoral College. This is crazy to the South. Lincoln, quite frankly, is he openly opposes slavery. First president that's ever been that way. And he's not going to be listed on the ballot in a lot of the southern states. So they didn't even get a chance to vote for him, which is going to drive them absolutely bonkers. Not one southern state votes for Lincoln. This is really, really going to make the South feel like they've been cheated. This guy doesn't win the popular vote. One of the first presidents who's not a devout Southerner. It's just going to really, really mess with their heads, and they're going to feel alone. Well, with Lincoln getting into office and Harpers Ferry fresh on their minds, and let's not forget the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, all of these things are going to culminate to the South basically feeling like the United States is no longer in their corner, and we are going to get the Secession Crisis here. Let's move over here. That way we can see a little bit better. All right, the Secession Crisis. This is where things get real. This is when the Civil War is about to get into almost to full swing. Secession Crisis, December 20th, 1860. South Carolina secedes from the Union. They're doing this under that good old John C. Calhoun precedent. You may remember the Tariff of Abomination. South Carolina looks at it and goes, you know what? If a law is unjust, if it doesn't, benefit our state, as a matter of fact, if it hurts our state, we can kick it out. And they say, you know what? Lincoln is bad. He is bad for South Carolina, and therefore we're going to secede. We have the right to do it, just like John C. Calhoun said. President Buchanan, who is the guy at the time, Lincoln wins in November. South Carolina secedes in December, but Lincoln's not going to be inaugurated until January. So Buchanan kind of washes his hands of the event. He doesn't really do anything to save South Carolina. It just happens, and everybody's sort of outraged by this. Congress does try to make it happen. Over here, we have the Crittenden Compromise, all right? Basically, it's an attempt to pull a Henry Clay to save the Union miraculously. Doesn't quite work out like that. Here's what it's all about. They say, okay, how can we get South Carolina to stay? Okay, well, basically, you know what? We'll keep that 3630 line. You remember that from the Missouri Compromise? We're just going to go it all the way to the Pacific. Everything south of that, slave. Everything north of that, that's going to be free. The other thing that they say is, listen, all you states that are already pro-slavery, we will never be able to take away slavery from you. We're basically going to protect slavery forever in the Deep South. We promise that, Maybe it'll work, but here's the thing. Lincoln flat out says, I will not sign this bill. I'll veto it. I will veto this if this gets to my desk. So it effectively dies, saying, putting it further, that South Carolina is gone. It's just not going to be part of the Union. Things are getting from bad to worse. This is all going to culminate in Fort Sumter. Okay, this is basically the beginning of the Civil War. So Fort Sumter, it's in South Carolina. It's basically, we got Charleston Harbor, and there's a little island, and on that island is Fort Sumter. Okay, this is right in the middle of the harbor, and it's on federal land. When a state secedes, it's no longer part of the federal government, so that land becomes state land. But the federal army didn't leave. They're just kind of stuck out there, and nobody ordered it to leave, so they're still out there. Here's the issue. They need supplies. How are they going to get those supplies? Because they're surrounded by South Carolina. Are they going to send a ship there? Well, Lincoln says, you know what? I'm going to send a non-military ship, and they're going to deliver some goods to keep the fort supplied. The South kind of goes crazy with speculation. They think this is going to be a secret invasion. This is all going to turn bad. They're going to invade South Carolina through Fort Sumter. They go crazy. On April 12th, 1861, the South Carolina is really feeling like it's pushed into a corner because Virginia has just voted that they do not want to secede from the Union. So they feel really alone, and they feel like they have to do something bold. So they bombard Fort Sumter, and they bombard it to absolute rubble. They shoot up the American flag. It is basically the final straw. The war has begun. So that's just kind of a brief little preview of what's leading up to the Civil War. All right. So Civil War begins in earnest. Let's move over here. Okay, right there. Okay, perfect. All right. So the Civil War begins in earnest. What do you need to know about the Civil War? I've written a couple key things in this big bubble in the middle. Okay. First thing you should know are some of the key actors in it. Okay, we've already mentioned a couple. Lincoln, for example, he's the president of the North. Okay, you see how I got it divided? I got the North over here, southern stuff over here. Okay, so the North, aka the Union, has Lincoln for president. Lincoln is the man. He is totally active. He's going to be doing all kinds of interesting stuff. He's going to be an amazing speaker. He's going to make big, bold war decisions that are going to deeply affect the outcomes of several battles. Okay, he's a very important active figure. On the southern side, in the Confederacy, we're going to have Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis sort of reluctantly takes the position. He's not the most active president. He's not going to be a humongous, bigger-than-life president in the South. He's not the same as Lincoln. He's not quite as effective. As far as the big generals are concerned, on the northern side, you got Ulysses Grant. He is a decent general. His strategy, which you're going to see to great effect, is to just be tenacious, just to keep at him. It doesn't matter if you get defeated, just keep attacking and attacking and attacking until you wear him down. On the other side, the big general for the South, Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee is one of the greatest generals of all time. He is a master tactician. He knows strategy inside and out, and he is going to cause the North an immense amount of trouble. The fact is, the military minds of the South are superior in almost every way. Couple other generals you should probably know. There's a lot of them, but these are sort of the big ones you should know. In the North, we have General Sherman. Sherman is a brutal but effective general. He's going to do things that aren't necessarily kosher in war, like burning down buildings and kind of slashing and burning his way through battles. But he's effective, extremely effective, to the point of bringing the South to its knees. On the other side, Stonewall Jackson, everybody knows him. He's going to be such an effective general that his presence alone on the battlefield will have an enormous effect. His death will be a turning point in the war. So a couple quick facts about the Civil War that you should definitely know. First thing is the difference in population. There are 22 million people up north compared to the South, where there's 9 million people. That's a huge difference, okay? That's basically going to mean the North has a much, much bigger army. Another thing, the North has way more money. Think of all the manufacturing. Think of all the factories. Think of all the shipping. All of it's happening up north. Cotton is an effective crop. I mean, it's a big crop, but you got to remember that's all there is. So the South doesn't have that much compared to the North. They just focus in on this one thing, and it's just not a diversified enough economy to generate those kinds of numbers. Another thing that's very, very important, the North has foreign recognition. The North is still effectively the United States of America. The South is a new country. The Confederacy has no foreign recognition. This is going to play a really big role because in order to make more money, the South says, hey, you know what? We're not going to trade with all of the people we've been trading with before because we want them to recognize us as a new nation. Then we'll start trading with them. This backfires horribly. They say, hey, England, hey, France, we're not going to trade with you. They say, okay, so what? We'll grow our own cotton in places like Egypt and stuff. And it backfires terribly. It's going to cause a major depression in the South during the Civil War. Another thing to remember, the North has a big, powerful navy. Aside from New Orleans and Mobile, the South doesn't really have any major ports. Up north, we got tons of stuff. From New York to Boston, this is a shipping, fishing mecca, and that means there's going to be a lot of ships, interesting ships that can go underwater, ships that are armored, all kinds of interesting things going on there. So the North is almost always going to have a naval advantage, even though the South strikes a few of its own victories at the beginning of the war. On the other side, the South has all the military all-stars. Almost everybody who went to West Point, they were Southerners. So when everybody faithfully goes home to their states, all the officers, all the generals from the U.S. Army march off to the South. It's going to be a really big issue for the North. Okay. Another thing to note, the North has political divisions. There's different parties up there. Not everybody is 100% behind Lincoln. Even though he won the election, he didn't get all the votes. He didn't win the popular vote, The North is still very much divided, and Lincoln has to deal with this divided Congress, and it's going to prove difficult for him in many ways. South, one of its advantages, no parties. Everybody's in the same boat. It's all about slavery, and we're just going to chug forward. Two big strategies. I got them right here. You should know, okay? The North, as far as its strategy in approaching the South, they have this thing called the Anaconda Plan. What they want to do is basically wrap it around and divide it. So they're going to navally blockade all of the big ports like Mobile and New Orleans, but they're also going to make it their priority to take the Mississippi, which will effectively divide the South in half. In that sense, you're going to squeeze the life out of it just like an anaconda. On the South, simple plan. Hold on until the North gets tired, It's a classic Southern strategy. The South is a big place, very little infrastructure. It's difficult to invade. If they can hold out long enough, they believe that the Union will cave in, okay? It's actually a pretty effective, it almost works in many ways because the South does manage to hang on for a long time. So let's go over some of the big points that surround the Civil War. Let's see, what do I have here? Okay, I know where we should begin. Stoll talked about this a lot. This would be a great essay question, so you definitely should keep it in mind. You see up there, I have First Modern War, okay? Let's see if I can get in a little bit closer, all right? So first of all, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die in this war. This is the first time that this happens. Stoll had a great quote. He said it would be the equivalent of, what was it? I can't remember the exact statistic. It was something like 1 out of every 3 college students would die. That would be the equivalent of it now. Don't quote me on that statistic, but there's a lot of people that are going to die. I think it's between 700 and 900,000 people who die in the Civil War. We're not exactly sure. The records aren't great. But that level of death hasn't been seen before, and a lot of it has to do with the technology in the war, modern technology. First of all, we're using rifles, okay? Rifles are a lot different than muskets. Muskets, it takes minutes to reload a musket, A rifle, not the case. You can quickly reload a rifle, and they're much, much more accurate, especially the stuff we had in America. you could shoot for hundreds and hundreds of yards and have an effective, accurate shot. Rifles are going to get so good that we're going to invent snipers are going to come out of this. We're going to get some of the best sharpshooters, especially on the South, who are going to pick apart officers from the Union like nobody's business. Really interesting stuff there. Another thing is we have technological innovations in weaponry like the Gatling gun. The Gatling gun is basically the first machine gun. That's going to really change things. A machine gun has the potential to wipe out a platoon. It can wipe out dozens and hundreds of people if it's put out unsuspectedly. Now you got to remember, when this war starts, we're still fighting old school style. Everybody's lining up in front of each other and unleashing the fire. Imagine being lined up in front of a machine gun. There's no hope. It's going to fundamentally change the way we fight battles. Another thing, we have armored ships. I mentioned that earlier. Some of these iron ships that the North is going to make, and the South, are basically going to change warfare forever. On the seas. You can't build these wooden ships anymore because you fire a couple cannons, they're going to go right through. Fire cannons at these metal ships, bounce right off, does nothing to them, maybe a dent, that's it. The whole world's going to pay attention to that, and everybody's going to change. Old Ironsides, all right? And finally, the last one, trench warfare. This is a big one because everybody's going to be doing trench warfare after this. It's this idea of embedding into the landscape to make yourself more effectively defensive, and it really is going to change the landscape of battlefields. It's going to make things a lot more dirty, a lot bloodier. It's not going to be this clean cut, everybody marching towards each other. You're going to get entrenched. You're going to really get into the battle, and it's going to be a much more chaotic, much more bloody place because of trench warfare. So keep that in mind while all this is going on, and that's going to explain a lot of the bloodbaths that we have going on through this. So, let's see, the best way to do this. No, not like that. There we go. That way the light's not going to be on it. Okay. See up there? First Battle of Bull Run. Okay, it's going to be the first battle in the war. That's going to be July 21st, 1861. Don't worry about the dates. I'm just telling those to you so you have a general timeline of what's going on. But it's going to be the first battle of the Civil War. Chaotic. All right, remember, like I said, this is a modern war, but they don't realize it until things get going. Think of it like two mobs just charging at each other, trying desperately to get things done. It's chaos, total chaos. But the South is a little bit less chaotic, and they're going to effectively win the battle. It's a huge embarrassment to the North. Nobody saw the South other than the South winning this battle. Really, really interesting little event there. Let's see. Shiloh. That's the next one I want to move to. There's a lot more battles in the Civil War, but I just want to focus in on the big ones. Shiloh is a really, really important battle. That's going to be in Tennessee. April 6th, 1862. The reason it's important is it has to do with the battle to control the Mississippi. Okay, so Admiral Farragut has just taken New Orleans, so we've got the mouth sealed, but we got to take care of everything in between. All right, this is going to be one of the key points. It's basically the gateway to the North. Okay, Grant. Ulysses S. Grant, he's going to be the guy who's running into Shiloh, and it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. We're talking thousands dead. It is a terrible, terrible battle. This is when people realize this war is not going to be easy. This war is going to be long, hard, and bloody. And it's so bad, even though Grant wins, some people criticize Grant for being too ready to get rid of human life. It's a real big moment in the war where people realize how real it is. A sobering moment for sure. But it's going to make the West, the Southern West, basically a place for disarray. Things are not looking good in the West for the South. And the Mississippi is going to almost be taken out. It will be taken out eventually in the battle we're going to see completely. The next thing I'd like to point out is, let's see, why don't we go, let's go to Gettysburg. Yeah, let's go to Gettysburg. Okay, so there's a lot that's happening between now and Gettysburg. There's kind of this give and take. The Lee's kind of kicking butt in the east. The west, it's kind of a mess. But eventually we get to a point where money is bad, supplies are bad, and Lee has to make a move. So he goes into... actually, no, let's not go there. Let's wait for that. Let's first focus on Vicksburg. Okay, now we're at Vicksburg is a really important moment in the capturing of the Mississippi. Vicksburg's basically the last place that the South has a solid hold on the Mississippi. That's going to be going May to July 1863. Grant's going to be leading this siege of Vicksburg, and they're going to take it. When they do take Vicksburg, the Mississippi is completely controlled by the North. It's going to divide the South, and that's going to really make things look desperate. So now we can go back to Gettysburg. Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to show that things are getting desperate. Even though Lee's doing a pretty good job in the East, he sees how bad things are going in the West, and he feels like he has to do something a little bit difficult. So he's going to invade the North. This isn't going to go well. He's going to go up there, and they're going to meet at a place called Gettysburg. Lee's artillery is going to fail. And when it does, we get the bloodiest battle of the entire war. He's going to lose. And he's routed to the south. He's allowed to keep going, but it kind of spells the end for the Confederacy. Things are really going to make a sharp decline now. A couple other terrible things that really mark the turning point in the war. You see up there, I have Chancellorsville. Okay? That's an important little battle for one big reason. Stonewall Jackson dies at that battle. When he dies there, things look even worse for the South. They needed him. He was the general that was keeping everything together. Another important thing that's going on, right in the middle of the Civil War, January 1st, 1863, Lincoln decides to do this little thing called the Emancipation Proclamation. Technically, he didn't have the authority to do this, but he went ahead and did it. Basically, it says, hey, all the slaves that are in the rebel southern states are effectively free. Come to the North and fight. This is going to be a really big deal. It's going to be, first of all, a shot in the arm to the Northern morale. It's going to make this not a fight about preserving the Union, but a fight about freedom. And this is going to allow black soldiers to get involved in the war in a way that's so big that black soldiers are going to prove to be extremely effective in the Civil War. So really, really big, important thing there. Things continue to get worse for the South. General Sherman takes Atlanta, and when he does, he decides that he's going to march to the sea. And while he's doing that, he's going to basically slash and burn everything of economic worth between there and the sea. This is a brutal tactic, and it's very, very ungentlemanly in war to do something like this. He doesn't kill any civilians, but he destroys their property. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to cause absolute chaos and misery in the South, and people are going to start writing letters to their boys on the front saying, everything's gone, we're in terrible straits, we don't know what to do. And then suddenly all the guys in Lee's army are going to be saying, I should go home and help my family. Desertion becomes a huge problem for the South after Sherman's march to the sea. So with all that in mind, things basically are over for the South. Lee realizes this. He meets up with Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, April 19th, 1865. We got that right there. Basically, the war is not totally over. People aren't going to find out for a while. There are going to be some little skirmishes and stuff like that, but effectively it's over. The Union wins. Confederacy is no more. All right? So, what does it all mean? Well, that involves Reconstruction. Okay. Let's go through this. Stoll didn't spend much time on this, but there's a couple really, really key points you should definitely know. Okay, first of all, what's the legacy of the Civil War? There's a couple things that are really, really important. First of all, the nation's united. You remember, ever since everything before the Civil War, the South has kind of been bullying the other states. It gets its way. Now there's this real sense of, hey, it doesn't matter what state you're from, we're doing something for the whole. We are united. We are the United States of America, you know? It's not this idea of us. It's, you know, it's not this idea of each individual country. It's this idea of us. You know, we are together. We are united. And that's really going to change the mentality of a lot of Americans. Really, really important stuff there. Also, the industry in the North is going to boom at this time. With the South kind of pushed out of the way as the economic powerhouse that it was, there's going to be tons and tons of factories and manufacturing that's going to go crazy up north. It's going to be a big, big industrial boom like never before. We are just about to enter into the great period of American capitalism, where you get guys like Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. You know, money is going to be coming into America like never before. Another thing that happens is the South is going to basically descend into absolute poverty. A lot of things are contributing to this. Basically, number one of the big things is they changed currency in the South. It went to being that Confederate currency. That's all useless now. So all the loans they took out in the Confederate currency, all the bonds that they took out in Confederate currency, yeah, that's all gone. So with all that gone, the economy's in shambles. What makes this even worse is cotton is not as valuable as it once was. Remember when I talked about all those foreign nations saying, hey, well, whatever, the South, we'll go and make our own cotton. Yeah, they did that, especially in places like Egypt. They start growing cotton, and the South just can't. It's just not as expensive as it once was, and they can't make the same money that they used to be able to make. Another thing to remember, this is a really interesting one. Protestantism kind of loses its vigor. Now, you remember, this was the country of the Second Great Awakening, of the Puritans. This is a religiously active country. Not anymore. Basically, religion kind of failed in the Civil War. People were asking God, hey, how do you feel about slavery? And people were completely divided on it, saying, hey, God, why have you allowed this horrible war to happen that's totally killed hundreds of thousands of people? They don't know. They have no answers for this, you know. Where was God during the Civil War? Well, this is going to effectively cause Protestantism to kind of go quiet. They're not going to be as vocal as they once were. Think abolitionists, how vocal and idealistic they used to be. That's not really going to happen in the late 20th century. Things are kind of dimming down a little bit religiously. The other thing that's important to note is cynicism. This kind of goes with the religious thing, is going to really take root in American culture. I say cynicism as opposed to kind of idealistic thoughts and behaviors and philosophies. You know, we're coming from Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, these guys who had big dreams of what a country could be. That dies out. Now we're more thinking, let's just try and survive. Let's just try and make some money and live an okay life, and let's not get too crazy. Let's just be practical, you know? That's very much going to be an American idea that's going to really sink into the zeitgeist of the period. Another thing, we're going to become a materialistic society. We're going to be more focused on money, more focused on wealth and possessions than ever before. We're just going to be focused on today instead of tomorrow. It's not going to be about, hey, let's see what kind of great, amazing things we can do. It's going to be, let's see, you know, what I can do today to make today better, you know. Really interesting stuff there for sure. Another thing worth mentioning is the new labor system in the South. There's this issue. Guess what? We don't have slaves anymore. How are we going to tend the land? Well, they come up with this idea called sharecropping. They say, okay, you do some labor for us, and we'll give you some land that we'll rent to you for a share of your cotton. That'll be your rent, you know. This is the best the South can do, but it's going to effectively make black people stuck in poverty. They will be forever in debt to the landowners who they're doing this tenancy with, this sharecropping with, and they'll never really be able to escape it. All the land is owned by whites, and they'll just continue to rent, and the rates will be absurd enough to the point where you never really can get out of it. A lot of people attribute this to why so many African Americans are in poverty today. A lot of people also attribute it to why so many African Americans are also in the South. About 90%, I think, are living in the South, the Deep South today. A couple other things, big things, important things that Stoll definitely emphasized. 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. 14th Amendment says anyone born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen, meaning all African Americans, guess what, you're citizens. That whole Dred Scott decision, let's just forget about that. Everybody's a citizen, including black people. 15th Amendment comes around. You can't deny the right to vote because of race or color. This is going to be because the South kind of tries to abuse this a little bit, and it has to be made into a constitutional amendment. Blacks will now have the right to vote. Really important stuff right there. So, on the whole, that's pretty much it. That's the Civil War and a lot of the events that sort of surround it. I know that's a lot of information. I apologize for the length of this video, but hopefully that helps out a little bit. So that's it for now. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can make a comment or send me a message or email me or Dr. Stoll or Courtney or Steve, anything you need, all right? I hope that helps out a little bit. Ciao.